Hi, I'm Amanda Schrader, and I'm looking at the Freeman v. Pitts case from 1992. So the issue began in 1969 with a court-ordered desegregation decree that was given to DeKalb County School District, which is in Atlanta, Georgia, from a class action suit of Black students and their families. Just a little background, in the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education case, school segregation was determined unconstitutional, and schools had to desegregate as quickly as possible. However, up until the late 1960s, DCSS was still legally segregated through a freedom of choice plan. In 1968, there was a case called Green v. School Board of New Kent County that deemed this freedom of choice plan as unsatisfactory on its own to meet the standards of desegregation. From this case came 6 standards of desegregation that a school must meet, and they will be under the supervision of the district court until all 6 are met. Something else of importance is there was a 41% increase in the Black student population in DCSS from 1969 to 1986. And I will talk about that a little bit more later on. However, in 1986, DCSS filed a declaration to be totally freed from supervision of the district court. However, the district court decided that they had only met 4 of the 6 standards, and the remaining 2 must continue to be under supervision until they were fully compliant. Neither party in this case was happy with this decision, as the DeKalb County School Board argued that they should be totally free. They believed that they had met the standards of desegregation. However, the Black students and their families argued that they should be totally supervised in all standards until they had been fully met. The case moved from the district court to the Court of Appeals, where the decision was reversed, and it became that the district must remain under full supervision for all standards until they were deemed compliant with all 6 standards at once for several years. And then it moved again to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had 2 very important questions to answer. The first being, is a district court permitted to withdraw supervision of a school system that is under a court-ordered desegregation decree in the areas in which the school system complies with its decree if it does not comply in every area? So this was essentially that first decision made in the district court. And then the second was, in the case of the DCSS, was the Court of Appeals correct in reversing the district court's decision to withdraw supervision incrementally? So this one was the Court of Appeals correct? Basically, they had to decide which court was more correct. The Supreme Court then decided unanimously to reverse the Court of Appeals decision, which allowed the district court to only keep control of the 2 standards that DCSS was not compliant with. They argued that that big increase in a Black student population, that 41%, due to housing, was not enough reason to give them control of all 6 standards. They said that there were some schools with up to 90% Black student populations and others that had 80% or higher white student populations, but that was out of the control of the school district because it was due to housing patterns. And so therefore, it was not violating any constitutional rights. There were a lot of other similar cases going on all over the country around this time, and as a whole, the decisions generally gave off the notion that the duties of desegregation of schools would be left up to the smaller courts to decide. After reading that, I was a little confused, so what happened? And I did find an article from the New York Times written the day after the decision, and I really liked this quote that said, "In many ways, the experts said the decision was more notable for what it did not do than what it did. There was still a lot of ambiguity of how to move towards desegregation, and as I said, there were a lot of similar cases that argued that due to housing patterns, this was out of their control, and they did not need to continue supervision." Personally, I disagree with this. I think that I would more side with the Court of Appeals and say that they should have remained supervision or had supervision of all 6 categories until they were all met for several years, just because I think that makes it a little bit easier for the school district to kind of slip and not put as much effort towards like fully desegregating, instead of just focusing on those last two and letting the rest kind of float off. And also there have been housing practices in our country for decades that make it more difficult for Black people to move to certain areas or buy houses, etc. And then there's also the issue of white flight. So white people leaving certain areas as Black people are moving in. And naturally, those together just continue to perpetuate that problem of segregation in our schools. And that's kind of why we still see that today. I think that cases such as Freeman v. Pitts would have been a great chance to address those issues. So it is a little disappointing to see that these could have been addressed, but nothing ever really came of it. As teachers, I think that what we really have to do is just continue to hold our schools and our districts accountable. Not only segregation in that bigger picture, but as teachers, we can see that in the classroom. So things like tracking or student discipline or special needs students. I think that as teachers, we really can advocate to make sure that that doesn't happen in our schools, in our districts. Additionally, we can help recruit and hire teachers, principals, other staff of color, as well as vote for school board members of color, just so that we have that representation in our schools, in our districts. And overall, I just think that we need to continue to strive towards a desegregated future within our schools.